now be seated. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good morning. Yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Ching Thoo A, anak lelaki Kim, Secretary General, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability. Yang berbahagia Datuk Arkitek P. Kasi, anak lelaki KL Palaniapan, Co-founder and prominent shareholder of MK Land Holdings Berhad. Yang berbahagia Professor Surveyor Technologist Dr. Adi Irfan Ching Ani, Pro Vice Chancellor, Income Generation and Development UKM. Yang berbahagia Arkitek Ardianta Aziz, President of Malaysian Institute of Architects PAM. Yang berbahagia Kolonel Bersekutu Permintaan Awam Profesor Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Syahimi Abdul Rahman, Dean Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment UKM. Yang berusaha Dr. Muhammad Khairul Azhar Mat Sulaiman, Head of Department of Architecture and Built Environment UKM. Yang berusaha Surveyor Dr. Suhana Johar, Director of International Conference on Regional Architecture and Built Environment 2025, Seni Bina 2025, and Pertubuhan Akitek Malaysia Postgraduate Conference 2025, PAM PGC 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with a great pleasure that we welcome you to the opening of the conference in conjunction with Martabat 2025, featuring two significant gatherings: Regional Architecture and Built Environment Conference, Seni Bina 2025, and PAM Postgraduate Conference 2025. To begin our session with blessings, we respectfully invite Ashraf Darwish to lead the prayer recital. May we now invite Ashraf Darwish to the stage.
إلى حضرة النبي المصطفى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه الكرام شيء لله الفاتحة. ربكوني أستجب لكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك الكريم وعظيم سلطانك. نسألك يا الله أن تبارك في هذا المجمع وأن تجعله مجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما. Ya Allah, pada hari yang penuh barakah ini, kami berhimpun di Majlis Martabat 2025 International Conference on Regional Architecture and the Built Environment, Seni Bina 2025 and PAM Postgraduate Conference 2025 dengan penuh rasa syukur atas limpah rahmat dan izin-Mu. Kami memohon kepadamu, Ya Allah, semoga Engkau menghimpunkan kami dalam suasana penuh kasih sayang, hikmah dan keberkatan. Allahumma aftah lana abwabal khair wa wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tardah warzuqna al-ikhlas fil qawli wal amal waj'al hadzal majlis ilman nafi'an wa amalan mutaqabbala. Ya Allah, Engkau yang Maha mengetahui, limpahkanlah kepada kami ilham, kebijaksanaan serta kefahaman yang mendalam agar setiap ilmu yang dipelajari sepanjang program ini dapat kami manfaatkan sebaiknya. Jadikanlah majlis ini medan memperkukuh ukhuwah, mempertingkat kemahiran serta mengangkat martabat ilmu dalam bidang seni bina dan pembinaan negara. Allahumma ja'al a'malana khalisatan liwajhikal karim wanfa'na biha fid dunya wal akhirah wa alhimna rushdana wa waffiqna likulli khair waqfiqna kulla syarrin. Ya Allah, perihalalah kami sepanjang program ini daripada sebarang perkara yang tidak diingini. Permudahkan segala urusan kami, lancarkan perjalanan majlis kami dan jadikanlah setiap detik perhimpunan ini sebagai satu amal soleh yang mendapat keredaan-Mu. Rabbana anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna lanakunanna minal khasirin. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina adzaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Thank you to Ashraf Darwish for the recitation just now. The program continues with a welcoming address by Yang Berbahagia Professor Surveyor Technologist Dr. Adi Irfan Ani, Pro Vice Chancellor of Income Generation and Development UKM. We invite Yang Berbahagia Professor to deliver his remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh and a very good morning. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Selamat pagi semua. Terima kasih pengacara majlis. Yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Ching Thoo A, Secretary General, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, yang merupakan alumni UKM. Terima kasih Datuk. Yang berbahagia Datuk Akitek P.Kasih, anak lelaki KL Palaniapan, co-founder and prominent shareholder of MK Land Holdings Berhad. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin Haji Muhammad Rasdi, Member Board of Directors, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia. Yang berbahagia Kena Bersekutu Pertahanan Awam, Profesor Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Suhaimi Abdul Rahman, Dekan dan penghulu kita, Fakulti Kejuruteraan dan Alam Bina UKM. Arkitek Adrianta Aziz, Presiden Persatuan Akitek Malaysia. Dr. Muhammad Khairul Azhar Mat Sulaiman, Chairperson, Department of Architecture and Built Environment, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment UKM. Surveyor Dr. Suhana Johar, Director, International Conference on Regional Architecture and Built Environment 2025, Seni Bina, and Pertubuhan Akitek Malaysia Postgraduate Conference 2025, PAM PGC 2025. Distinguished members of the university's esteemed industry partners, stakeholders, participants, researchers, students dan anak-anak sekalian. Apa khabar anak-anak arkitektur pada pagi ini? Boleh dengar suara sikit? Okay. Daripada hari Sabtu kita difahamkan, okay, dan terus kekal hingga ke akhir pada hari terakhir hari ini. Terima kasih atas komitmen dan kerjasama semua bagi menghormati majlis dan meraihkan rakan-rakan antarabangsa yang hadir pada hari ini. Saya mohon izin untuk meneruskan ucapan ini di dalam bahasa Inggeris. Ladies and gentlemen, I begin this address with profound gratitude and immense pride. Today we are not simply launching a new initiative. We are bearing witness to a milestone of great significance, one that reached far beyond UKM, shaping the future of higher education, guiding the course of urban development, and safeguarding the architectural heritage of our nation. From my own journey in this development, policy, economic sustainability, and international governance, I see Martabat 2025 and its conferences as more than the academic gatherings. They are living platforms that bring together the voice of scholars, professionals, and the next generation, forging unity in our pursuit of collective solutions to the challenges of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, today, the issue of environmental sustainability, sustainable development, and cultural heritage preservation stand at the very center of a global discourse. In trade negotiation, in national development planning, and in climate change deliberation, the value of heritage is no longer measured merely in economic terms. It is now recognized as a reflection of identity, a foundation of community resilience, and a symbol of national pride. As the Pro Vice Chancellor of a university built on the vision of empowering local language, culture and values as a university watan kita, I take a deep pride in how architecture is increasingly seen not only as a design and form, but as the custodian of our collective memory and a vessel for national sustainability. The Seni Bina 2025 conference and the PAM Postgraduate Conference stand as proof of this conviction. They are scholarly arenas that fosters an architectural ecosystem grounded in our history and culture, responsive to environmental and urban crises, and strengthened by the partnership of government, industry and community. When we speak of sustainability, we must look beyond the technical dimension. We must ask, who will truly benefit? Who may be left behind? How can our research give direction to public policy? And how can we prepare our students not only to design building but to shape values, policy and society itself? I believe this conference is where we can begin to craft those answers, to reframe our thinking, and to ensure that humanity is woven into every technical conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to convey my deepest appreciation to the Martabat 2025 Organizing Committee, the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment of UKM, our dedicated lecturers, staff and students who committed day and night has driven this program from its earliest vision to today's reality. I also extend my gratitude to the presenters and panelists, both from Malaysia and from abroad. This is the true strength of UKM. When we move forward as one community, we rise together. As a close, I call upon each of you to seize this moment. Let this be more than a conference. Let it be a turning point, gaining knowledge, build enduring networks, exchange ideas with openness and courage. Above all, carry with you the awareness that you are not merely participants in an event. You are builders of solutions. You are shapers of the future. You are custodians of hope in a world that looks to us for answers. Allow me to remind you of the words of Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, who once said, "Knowledge is power, information is liberating, education is the premise of progress in every society, in every family." His words remind us that the work we do here is not for ourselves alone, but for the progress of generations to come. And so, let us carry forward the spirit of this gathering under a simple yet profound conviction. Together, we preserve the past, we shape the present, and we build the future. May Martabat 2025 inspires us all to lead the wisdom, to act with courage, and to serve with unwavering purposes. Wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Sekian, terima kasih.
Thank you to Yang Berbahagia Professor for the inspiring and meaningful speech. Padi segenggam di dalam peti, padi di sawah menghijau bumi. Hari bersidang bersatu hati, ilmu dikongsi menambah seri. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the moment we have been waiting for has arrived. To officially commence our event, I would like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Ching Thoo A, Secretary General of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, to officiate this conference. Please welcome Yang Berbahagia Datuk.
Terima kasih saudari pengacara majlis. Terima kasih UKM kerana sudi menjemput saya untuk balik ke UKM. Terima kasih banyak-banyak. Ini kali yang ketiga secara rasmi saya berada di dalam dewan yang gah inilah. Yang berbahagia, Professor Surveyor Technologist Dr. Adi Isfan Cik Pro Vice Chancellor Income Generation and Development UKM. Yang bahagia Datuk Akitek PKC Anak Lelaki KL Palaniapan, Co-founder and prominent shareholder of MK Land Holdings Berhad. Yang bahagia Colonel Bersekutu Profesor Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Syuhaimi Abdul Rahman, Dean Fakulti of Engineering and Built Environment UKM. Yang Pusat Dr. Muhammad Khairul Azhar Mat Sulaiman, Chairperson Department of Architecture and Built Environment, Fakulti of Engineering and Built Environment UKM. Yang Pusat Surveyor Dr. Suhana Johar, Director Seni Bina 2025 and PAM PGC 2025. Yang Pusat Akitek Adriata Aziz, President PAM, Persatuan Akitek Malaysia. Distinguished members of the University, esteemed interdisciplinary practitioners, stakeholders, researchers, students, and tuan-tuan dan puan-puan. I am truly honored to address the esteemed Seni Bina 2025 and the Pertubuhan Akitek Malaysia Postgrads Conference 2025. This conference brings together some of the finest minds in the architecture and the built environment, and it's indeed a privilege to be among you today. As an alumnus of UKM, I would like to convey my congratulations to the entire organizing teams who have made these programs a success. Terima kasih. In bringing together leading minds from academia, industry, and government, UKM is helping to advance not only scholarly discourse, but also the practical pathway to which architecture and can strengthen communities, drive innovations, and accelerate the global sustainability agenda. The theme of this conference, Future Horizon in Architecture, Integrating Heritage, Innovation and Sustainability, addresses the challenge of integrating past, present, and the future. The theme calls upon us to balance heritage preservation with progress, to fuse technological advancement with cultural continuity, and to ensure that sustainability is not an afterthought, but serve as the very foundation upon which living environments are envisioned and built. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in an era where climate change is no longer a distant threat. It is here, it is real, and it is accelerating. From the unprecedented heat wave and rising sea level rise to extreme floodings and biodiversity loss, the effects are visible in our daily life. Malaysia, as a biodiverse nation, is particularly vulnerable. Our cities are growing rapidly, our built environments expanding, and yet with growth comes responsibility. The building and construction sector alone contribute up to 40% of the global carbon emissions. And as we strive for progress, we must also commit ourselves to climate resilience and environmental stewardship. In alignment with Malaysia National Energy Transition Roadmap and NETR, the National Climate Change Policy, and our pledge to achieve net zero greenhouse gas by the year 2050, NRDS is committed to accelerating green transformation across every sector. However, achieving these aspirations cannot be done alone by the government. It demands the collective effort of architects, urban planners, engineers, researchers, and innovators alike. You are the designers of our future, the one who shape how we live, how we work, and how we interact with the nature. This conference provides us with an opportunity to rethink the regional architecture and built environments in a rapidly changing world. Our approach must go beyond aesthetics. It must embody sustainability, resilience, and inclusivity, which includes, among others, designing a low-carbon society, integrates renewable energy system, energy-efficient materials, and green certification into every development. Climate resilient urban planning, prioritize natural water retention, flood mitigation, and adaptive infrastructure to safeguard communities. Nature-based solutions incorporates urban forests, vertical gardens, and green roofs to combat urban heat islands and restore ecological balance. And circular construction economy, reuse, repurpose, and recycle material to minimize water and optimize resources. The choice you make as a professionals will determine whether we deplete or restore our natural resources. I urge all architects, researchers, and postgraduate innovators here today to embrace nature sustainability agenda and becoming an agent of change. Here is how you can support our national aspirations. 1. Innovative greens. Bring forward solutions that reduce carbon footprints while enhancing livability. Inform, educate, and advocate. Use your expertise to influence policy, inspire communities, and raise awareness about sustainable living. And thirdly, collaborate and lead. Join hands across disciplines, institutions, and industries to scale impactful solutions. Remember, every blueprint you design, every material you choose, and every project you deliver has the power to shape Malaysian environmental legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I affirm the commitments of the Ministry to continue supporting all initiatives in higher education, research, and population development that contribute to our national sustainability goals. We welcome collaborating partnership with universities such as UKM, particularly in the area of policy research, urban planning, and the empowerment of rural communities through design and infrastructure. Let us remind ourselves that the work we do today is not merely for ourselves, but for the nation to come. Architecture and the built environment shape how people live, work, and thrive. Therefore, every effort, every innovation, and every design must be seen as a legacy of hope, resilience, and progress. To the young minds here, remember that you are not only building structures, but also building societies, shaping culture, and safeguarding our planet's future. To the industry leaders and practitioners, your expertise and leadership are the pillars that will guide Malaysia and the world towards a more inclusive and sustainable tomorrow. I'm confident that together we can rise to the challenges before us. With courage, creativity, and collaboration, there is no limit to what we can achieve. Let this conference be a spark that ignites new possibilities, a reminder that the horizon is never the end, but always the beginning of new opportunities. On that note, I want to express my sincere gratitude to UKM and all supporting partners for making this conference possible. Together, let us continue to advance climate-conscious designs and sustainable solutions, ensuring that the world we leave behind is stronger, greener, and more just the one we inherited. With this, I hereby declare the International Conference on Regional Architecture and Built Environment 2025 and the Pertubuhan Akitek Malaysia Postgrad Conference 25 officially open. Terima kasih.
Thank you for the speech. We kindly request Yang Berbahagia Datuk to remain on the stage. We are delighted to invite Yang Berbahagia, Professor Surveyor Technologies Dr. Adi Irfan Ani, Pro Vice Chancellor of Income Generation and Development UKM, and Yang Berusaha, Surveyor Dr. Suhana Johar, Director of the International Conference Seni Bina 2025, to the stage. We would like to request Yang Berbahagia Datuk to strike the rebana in the count of 3, 2, 1. Thank you to Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Ching Thoo A and all dignitaries for officiating the International Conference on Regional Architecture and Built Environment 2025 and PAM Postgraduate Conference 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed privileged to welcome an esteemed figure in the field of architecture and national development as our keynote speaker. Allow me to introduce Yang Berbahagia Datuk Arkitek P. Kasih Anak Lelaki KL Palaniapan, a professional architect, co-founder of MK Land Holdings Berhad, former president of PAM, former chairman of Akasia, and recipient of numerous international awards. With great honor, we invite Datuk Arkitek P. Kasih to deliver the keynote address.
Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Ching, Profesor Dr. Adi, Profesor Dr. Muhammad Suhaimi, Dr. Muhammad Khairul, Surveyor Dr. Suhana, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and I hope all the students who are present here today have had 2 good days. I'm told today is the last day, and I'll start with my talk. Can I have the next slide, please? Next. I'm going to talk about 3 things this morning. One, a lot of architects and architectural students, when they study in college, they are more concerned about design. And I found through my own life experiences that we are capable of a lot more things than just design. I've introduced the word creativity, and I'm going to talk about creativity this morning, that the focus should be on creativity and not just design. 2, a lot of students, when they study in college, graduate and come into the profession, they think that their job is in consultancy. I'm going to throw the field open that there's plenty of opportunities outside consultancy, and my whole life, I'm going to share many experiences of what you are capable of in the industry. Thirdly, a lot of people, once they finish college, they think studies is over. I find that learning is a lifelong experience. Every day, I learn new things. I read new books, and I accumulate a lot of knowledge over the years. And if you want to progress in the world today, you need to do the same. I have a subject called personal development. You need to constantly improve yourself and serve the profession and society. Next. Next. I start with this slide because I'm here today because last year PAM awarded me the Ching Thoo A Medal, which is basically a lifetime leadership and service to the architectural profession, which is equivalent to the gold medal for design. And I thank Architect Adrianta, the president of PAM, because he is the one who requested me to speak at this workshop this morning. Next. Next. That's a book that I published last year. Next. Now what is important is, when I got this award, this wasn't in my to-do list last year. And it took me about 8 months from the time of submission, producing the book, receiving the award, and talking. We are supposed to give a 1-hour lecture at the talk. And in the process, I began to analyze my whole life over the last 60 years and see what is it that actually drove me to do so many things in life. And the one word that came up was creativity. I knew I was doing things outside the profession. I knew about personal development. But the theme of creativity came throughout all the work that I've done, and that has been the focus since last year of many of these talks. Now the top photograph, those of you who haven't seen a photo, that is Datuk Ching Thoo A, one of the past presidents of PAM and one of the doyens of the industry. And Datuk Ching Thoo A and I used to serve together on Lembaga Architect. Next. Now I'm happy to speak at this Bengkel. I was reading that it's the 36th Bengkel. Now that reminded me that I have a part in the formation of all these things, because in 1986, PAM asked me to organize the first Acacia Students' Jamboree. And later on, I'll be speaking about the Jamboree. And the Jamboree was a very, very successful event, and for the last 40 years has been held around so many Asian countries within Asia. It's been held 20 times. In 2 weeks, it's going to be held in Korea, and I'm going there. What happened after ITM and PAM hosted the Students' Jamboree in 1986, we realized that there's no equivalent in Malaysia. The 3 schools of architecture were not talking to one another. And I checked my files. In July 1987, we actually set up the PAM Academic Institutions Committee, and in 1988, I became the chairman of education in PAM and the chairman of this committee. Next. We had many, many meetings in 1988, and I see from my minutes in my files that we wanted the 3 schools to meet regularly. ITM, if I'm not mistaken, started the first Bengkel, and I have on record that in 1990, the 4th Bengkel was held in UTM in Johor, and the National University of Singapore students joined the Bengkel. During the 88 and 89, we also started the students' exhibition. PAM Education Fund provided the prizes, and we sponsored students to the Acacia Jamboree. Next. Now, I've done many things in education. Many of you may not know, possibly because you all are much younger. In the 1980s, in addition to being education chairman, I was also chairman of the Asian Acacia Committee of Education for 4 years, chairman of the Part 3 panel on CAEM, on college accreditation, and the PAM Education Fund. In all, I've served the last 40 years, a large part of it in education, particularly internationally. Okay, next. Now, if you ask what do architects do, a lot of you will say they design buildings. If I ask what else do they do, you will say anything from interior design to town planning to property development. But I think you can do more than that. Next. In addition to design skills, architects have what I call creativity. Creativity is defined as original imagination of something that is not existent, that brings value. It can be ideas, it can be a new product, it can be anything. And architects have got that creative ability in you. This morning when I came in, I saw the students bringing in all those banners in. It is an idea of creativity. A lot of things that we do in college, in life, it's all about coming up with new things. Next. Now, when you are in college, the way we are trained, we think we are all going to become star architects. But ask yourself, how many star architects are there? Even in Malaysia, you can count 20. Now, what do the rest of us do? A lot of us go and join commercial firms. What do the rest of people do? Complain, gaji tak cukup. That's generally human response. Now, it's not surprising. If you look at the salaries going in the industry today, I won't be surprised. What are graduates getting today in architecture? 2,000? Any guesses? Not much. I remember 40 years ago, 45 years ago, when I started working as an architect in Malaysia, my gaji was already 1,400. In 45 years, salaries have not gone up. Why? I will explain later on. The industry, the way we are trained as architects, one of the mistakes we are doing is that we are only focusing on consultancy. Next. The building industry is a very large piece of cake. Consultancy is only about 6%. That's 94% of the cost in other areas of the building industry. We are not focusing on this 94%. And one of the things that I did right along the years was to move out of consultancy. Don't think I'm not a consultant, I still own the consultancy together with my partner, but most of my time is spent outside consultancy. And you find that consultancy is only about 6% of the fees. 94% is in other areas. Next. I try to look at the size of the industry. The property industry in Malaysia is approximately 200 billion. Construction industry is 250 billion. Building industry is about 150 billion, but if you take away the industrial buildings and many other works, civil works that are done by engineers, I estimate that the architects' involvement in the building industry is only about 80 billion. So you take 6 billion, services is about 5.5 billion. By the year 2030, that's expected to go to 13 billion. So what we are doing is that we are fighting for a very small size of the cake. And when the cake is very small, the fees is small, gaji pun kecil. What we need to do is think beyond consultancy. Go next. Now, to do a project as an architect, you need to know a lot of knowledge. When you go outside consultancy, the knowledge that you need increases. Next. If you go into property development, you're not only talking about the product, but you need to talk about approvals, land matters, you've got to talk about facilities, finance, sales, marketing. You need to keep enlarging your knowledge. Next. Now, I'm going to demonstrate to you through my own life how creativity has played a large part in my success. I started very young. At the age of 10 to 16, my dad already got me involved in doing a lot of things. He used to have one shelf of books. I couldn't read all those books, but it inspired me that books have got a lot of knowledge. He was a scholar of Dale Carnegie at that time. He used to teach me how to go to the post office, traveling by myself in a bus, doing bank transactions, even the weekly marketing at Central Market. Next. Now that's a picture of the Central Market. What you call Pasar Seni today, this was when it was a wet market. And that's the kind of bus that I used to take to go to the market. Next. Now, I was lucky to get admission in Sekolah Menengah Teknik, even for our SPM, which was then called MCE. I already was studying land surveying, building construction, and all that. Used to take 2 buses to school. It created a hunger in us to succeed. Masa dulu, 95% of all architects in the country were trained overseas. There were only 3 schools of architecture, UTM, ITM, and USM. And therefore, to get a place was difficult. To find money to pay for tuition was difficult. And it created in what I call a hunger for success. Those of us who are older would realize we never had it easy. It was difficult. Next. And my father was a mere school teacher, English school teacher. He couldn't afford to send me to the UK or Australia. And I ended up going to India to study because I was lucky that at PAM at that time, the secretary was a gentleman called Rajadurai. My father knew him. And he suggested there were 2 colleges in India which were recognized by the Royal Institute of British Architects. And I went to the school in New Delhi. I didn't do my matriculation. I didn't do my A-levels. I went straight at the age of 16 and sat for the entrance exam. There were more than 1,000 students sitting for the entrance exam, only 33 seats, and I got one of the seats. Next. Next. I got limited time, so I'm going to skip one of it. Now, what is important is, when I look back at my life, at the entrance exam, one of the tests that they did was they gave you 3 pictures. In 10 minutes, you had to write an essay using these 3 pictures. And I still remember the 3 pictures that I got from my test. One was a man on a bullock cart, a pair of boots, and a bottle of alcohol. And you had to write an essay in 10 minutes. And I remember what I wrote. I said, the bullock cart driver drank the alcohol, got high, he was driving the bullock cart, his boots came out. You know, they test your creativity. And this was the beginning of creativity. We had highly intelligent students in class. I came from a system in MCE where we were still having objective ABCD answers to questions. And you went there, I had 2 students with me in college, and I want to share this with you. One was a student who was an all-time topper of the school examination in India. He had 500,000 students sitting for it, and he was an all-time topper. He had admission to all the best universities, and he chose to come and study with us. First year, the toughest subjects were maths and structures. 3-hour papers, he finished in 1 hour and walked out, and he got 100% marks in both the papers. That's the kind of pressure we had to study. And in India, they had a National Association of Students of Architecture, which was like what you all are having in the Benkel, those days there were 25 colleges of architecture and 1,000 students used to meet. And for 2 consecutive years, I presented the seminar and got the first prize. And that gave me a lot of confidence that I can do well. And in the 3rd year, there was this very eminent Indian architect called A.P. Kanvinde who came for the jury. He picked up my library design project, called the class together, and he gave us a 2-minute lecture. He said, the essence of an architect is the seed of an idea. He says, once you have the seed of an idea, you can employ 100 architects to draw and build it. But the seed of the idea is what differentiates an architect from others. Next. That's my picture in college. And since then, I realized 2 things. Ideas come and go, you forget about it. And till today, I carry 2 pens with me, red and black, and I carry paper in my pocket. Okay? Now, it is very important that those days we used to carry sketchbook. Ideas come and go. You need to capture those ideas, because even today I realize I have an idea. If I don't write it down, 10 minutes later I can forget what it was. Next. Many years later, when I was attending the International Union of Architects meeting, we went to the Sydney Opera House to the back rooms, where we were told that the Sydney Opera House was a competition held in 1956 and won by the Danish architect John Utzon. Now, when he was entering in the competition, he was peeling oranges. And when he peeled oranges, he realized the skin of the orange looks like a sail of a boat. And he designed shell structures like this. Now, his design was actually discarded on the floor when one of the jurors walked past it, picked it up and said, hey, this is a fantastic design. He had a tough time building it. He actually disagreed with a lot of things and walked out of the project. But 25 years later, Australia realized that this has become a big icon for Australia. Australia is only known for 2 things, the kangaroo and the Sydney Opera House. 25 years later, they called the architect and they honored him for having designed this building. Now, that's what the seed of an idea can do. I realized what this architect talked about in my library project. The seed of an idea is the essence of an architect. The creative idea. Next. Now, in 4th year, at that time, the world was going through an oil crisis. In the 70s, we had 2 oil crises. And in response, that was the beginning of energy in buildings. It was a new subject that was introduced. And I had a professor, V.K. Gupta, and I actually did my thesis on autonomous settlements. It was a very important part of my life because as a 21-year-old student, I was imagining a new settlement that would be running without grid electricity, without water, without sewage, without waste disposal. And how do you design a settlement for people where houses can be built without all this? We realize the house doesn't even if you have solar cookers, the house doesn't get the sunlight into the building for you to use the solar cookers. Instead of the kitchen being on the ground floor, we may have to design the kitchen on the first floor. There were a lot of implications, a lot of things that I learned. It predates the green building movement that we hear of now. Next. 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 I later on wanted to do more work on this, and I went to work for the Tata Energy Research Institute in Pondicherry, run by a very well-known solar scientist, Dr. C.L. Gupta. He has done a lot of work on solar energy. His name is quoted in many books. He lived in the ashram in Pondicherry, and it exposed me to alternative lifestyles of people. They had started the new township of Oroville, where you had students studying in their schools, where a standard 4 student can study mathematics at standard 4, but can operate a computer. They had no exams. So you could learn anything that interested you. You had a lot of Westerners living in the ashram who were teaching these kids, and it was a completely different look to life. You could see people learning because they wanted to learn, not because they needed to pass an exam. Next. I was supposed to go to the US to do my PhD. Already had offers from 2 universities. I had not been back to Malaysia for 5 years, and I thought I'll come back and see what's happening before I go meet up with the family. Next. Next. And I started work in Architects Team 3. There's Dato Baharudin and Dato Sri Lim Chong Kiat, both of whom are PAM gold medalists subsequently. And under them, I was assigned to the housing section. Next. And this project in Shah Alam, I was the one who started this in 1981, which had the library, the MPSA tower, and we were doing the urban design for the new town center in Shah Alam. Even then, this was the largest car park, 6,000 cars. And it was the first time we were facing how to design our firewalls for such a large car park. Next. What happened in that year was that my father passed away. He was just 53. And therefore, I had to look after the family and had to drop the idea of going to the US. So instead of finding a Dr. Pikasi professor in the US, you now find Pikasi in Malaysia. And that changed my whole life. Next. I had finished my part 3. I had to go and do 2 years with the government at that time. We had to serve 2 years in the government before you could register. And while many went to work in JKR, I chose to teach in ITM. And I put in those 2 things there because that's when Proton was introduced. And they started taking bookings for the car where we didn't know the price of the car, nor what it looked like. They bid car number plates, and I bid for car number plate Proton 221. I was very loyal to the country. Till today, I still have the number plate. I've changed about 10 Proton cars. And I put that on the right-hand side. That's what the driving license looked at in those days, not what you see today. Next. Now, that's when I began a life of service. When I joined ITM, I realized that a lot of academicians never got involved in the institute. And in 1983, I joined PAM committees in the invitation, and in 84, I had the opportunity to participate in a joint project that PAM did with MIT in Boston and the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture, where we were looking at the piece of land that is now known as KLCC. The race course had just left Kuala Lumpur, and they were trying to get ideas on what to do. And it was a joint project that is Tan Sri Alia Soma, who was the mayor then, and we had a joint exhibition and produced a book and ideas, both from Malaysia, ITM and UTM students, as well as MIT in Boston. I became a council member in 85. And in 1986, Malaysia held the Asian Congress of Architects, ACA2. And David Tay, who was then the convener for the convention, 7 or 8 months before, he said, "We've been asked to organize a student jamboree. Not sure whether we can do it." Then he looked at me and he said, "Kasi, can you do it?" I said, "I will try." I took on the task of organizing the Students' Jamboree, and I knew from my past experience in attending student events in India, I asked, what do you want out of the Jamboree? Nobody had a clue what to do in a Jamboree. So I came up with my own ideas on a 5-day plan. And next, we brought in students from 10 countries, worked with ITM. The director at that time, Datuk Nick Rashid, was very supportive. We had a very small budget, and we could use the hotel and catering faculty facilities in ITM, their bus and everything. The creativity even then was there on how to do things with very little resources. In those days, there was no internet, there was no smartphone, there was nothing. I was very worried. Students who travel from overseas, how are they going to be picked up at the airport? How does this work? So I came up with the idea of a buddy. We linked one foreign student with one local student whose task was, from the time he landed at the airport, to pick him up, bring him by bus to the campus, until he went back, send him back to the flight. So we came up with a lot of creative ideas on how to actually manage the Jamboree. Next. This was the first Jamboree. The students were very creative. When I say everything wasn't me. I had whole teams of people helping me, but because I had the idea, I was leading the committees and leading the teams on what to do. Next. This photograph was spontaneous. It was not organized. All the students got together at the AKA 2 and took this photograph. I believe there's some students from Thailand. If you see the dark coat, that is Professor Songkun Atakor from Thailand. In the photograph, there's David Tay, Hajida, and some of the professors from Indonesia also there. Katadi Vira is there. And many of the students come from 10 or 12 countries. It was very, very successful. Next. Next. Out of the Jamborees now that's been held for the last 40 years, I put these two photographs because one of the students became the president of the Jabatan Akitek Indonesia, Ahmad Juhara. He passed away during the COVID time. And Saleh Sakum, president of PAM, he attended the 8th Jamboree in ITM. Last year, 2 years ago, I was invited to Philippines to speak at the Jamboree. And when I showed the slide, a lot of the students who were there said, they took that up and said they'll become president of their own institutes. It inspired a lot of people that you can attend a Jamboree and reach such high positions. Next. So after we did the Jamboree, we started the PAM Academic Institutions Committee, held many meetings, and now it has come to the point where you're having your Benkel and the Malaysian Students Alliance. All this is part of history. Pakistan went through the same thing. They had 5 schools of architecture, never spoke to one another. After the Jamboree, they brought the schools together. Now, one of the things I'm going to suggest today, I have actually started the process of doing a book on the Student Jamboree. We have 40 years of experience. And a lot of people don't know where it was held, what happened, etc. And I was thinking this morning, you should also do one on the Benkel. Ridwan, I was going to tell Adrianta to take this up in PAM. If you don't document it, many of us are still alive. We have records of what happened. A time will come when nobody knows. If I ask when was the first Benkel, nobody knows. Which year was it held? Next. Next. I put this in 1985. I started my practice. Very small. That's my wife, no secretary. She used to come in to type. Those days, started computer, typewriter. And I started doing many projects. Next. Even then, I had a planning section and a QS section within the office. Next. Now, architects, the perception outside is that they are flashy people. In the 80s, if you had APAM after your name, you could afford to own a Porsche or two. After the recession in 85, people used to joke, "Tak mampu beli Proton or two." That's how fast things change in the country. Next. And I did a lot of service to the society, not just in architecture, but outside architecture. Next. Next. I started as a consultant doing a lot of creative things. Clients trusted me to buy pieces of land for them, to come up with ideas. In fact, I initiated in Seranda at that time what was called this Seranda Golf Resort. It was an empty piece of ex-mining land, and one of my clients, one day in the course of conversation, he told me, I went to see the DO, masa tu Plus Highway wasn't there. And he said he wanted a place for the lorries to stop like an R&R. And he gave him a piece of land, about 15, 20 acres. And I said, you cannot sustain it just by having an R&R. And there was plenty of ex-mining land around, and came up with the idea of building a 600-acre golf resort, which ultimately the golf course was built and the housing was built. Next. Next. Creativity started showing very early in my life. Next. But what was different was that I found margins were very low, projects dragged. I used to spend a lot of time, and I also realized that the fees was not good enough for doing honest work. Next. And I had started improving myself, personal development. I used to read a lot. And I realized the power of visualization, that if you can conceive in your mind something you want to do, you can actually achieve it by putting in the effort. Next. And when I was doing Seranda Golf Resort, Plus Highway was under construction. And I realized there was a road, Sungai Cho Road, where had they had an interchange, it would have given us very easy access. We knew somebody who owned a piece of land in that area. And I came up with a scheme to buy 1,000 acres of land. I brought the idea. I came with the idea to apply for a new interchange in Sungai Cho, and brought together a group of investors who actually put up the money. With 1 million capital, we borrowed $20 million from the bank. If the economy had turned, with our personal guarantee, we would have been wiped off. The risk was very high, but within a period of 2 years, we succeeded in getting the interchange approved, as well as getting conversion for the piece of land. But before we could implement it, there were shareholder problems, so we ended up selling it. And by selling it, all of us made money, including the landowner. And as an architect, there was the first few million that I made as an architect. I was merely 33 years at that time, like a startup. This project paid the first dividends to me for creativity. Next. The project at that time with 1,000 acres, 10 minutes. I thought I had 45 minutes. Okay, so anyway, we were one of the few large property groups in the country, even at that time. Go on, next. We picked up other projects along the way, distress projects. With creativity, we solved a lot of the problems and made money out of it. Next. 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 This was the next big project, the Bukit Merah Lake Town project. We were looking, wait. We had a lake. Go back to the previous slide, okay. We had a lake, which because of the highway construction, the area was disturbed, and we wanted to do a lake resort. The water in the lake was actually used for drinking water. There were a lot of concerns on pollution. At that time, the EIA had already come in, Datuk Ching, and we did an EIA and we proved that the E. coli content in the water was higher. There was sewage that was being disposed into the lake. Fertilizer from the plantations was coming into the lake. And we agreed to abide by the environmental rules that no water will be discharged into the lake. And we had a 24/7 water quality monitoring. So the water that was treated for drinking water was not affected. And with that, next. We built this new resort. At that time, the only water park was in Kuala Lumpur, the one by Sunway. And we built the next water park here. And this brought in a lot of tourism. If you look at the reports at that time in Perak, 25% of domestic tourism came from this project. Next. Next was a piece of land in Damansara Perdana. Go to next. I'll go quickly. Next. Okay. What was a squatter area like this and a hill has now become this on the LDP. If you travel along the line, you will notice most highways go straight. This is the only place where the highway takes a detour. When they were building the highway, they didn't know how to deal with the squatters, and therefore they deterred the highway. My partner was very unhappy because they took away part of our land. I told him, don't worry, because when a highway goes, you get a lot of visibility for the buildings. When you travel straight along the highway, you get a lot of visibility on the buildings. Next. We kept the hill. There were a lot of people telling us, cut the hill. You will get granite, first source of money. Second source of money is from the earth. Next, you can build terrace houses, third source of money. But both of us refused to do it. We kept the hill and we built around the hill. Until today, there's a lot of environmental protection in the projects that we do, not cutting the hills. Next. Now, next was a project on affordable housing. We had gone to Africa, to Namibia, as part of the Malaysian government's help to Namibia to build affordable housing. It was a 16-hour plane journey to Johannesburg. Then we had to take another flight to Windhoek, 1.5 hours, and travel 400 kilometers to the site. One day when I was sitting in a conference that we had organized in BIM, somebody presented a paper showing the housing needs of the country, where affordability, most of the housing that we are building are actually luxury housing. The bottom people don't have enough housing. So we came up with a proposal to the government at that time to build low-cost houses and medium-cost houses. At that time, low-cost houses were only selling at 25,000. Next. And we built all this. Next. We had urban parks within it. Next. There are a lot of creative ideas that went into the design. Next. This was all done under MK Land. Next. And this was a project that we looked at in Langkawi. The Prime Minister at that time didn't want reclamation. He said, go and see this project in Port-Grumet in France, where they had built, this was an architect who was also a sailor. He had come up with the idea for this project where the boat can come up to your house. And he said, don't reclaim this land. So we had to come up with an idea how to do this. Go next. So we came up with the idea of the Kalong and the Malay house. Next. It had a lot of emotional appeal. while the project was under construction, you already had people coming to say whether they could stay in it. Now, all this I'm showing because of creativity. Next. Ratan Tata, who just passed away, he was a mechanical engineering student at Cornell University, but he never practiced architecture. He attributed his business success to his architectural training, which taught him to creatively tackle problems from different angles. Reflecting on his education, he noted, "The miles of tracing paper taught us not to stick with one idea. We kept trying, improving, and rethinking, which is the same in business." Architectural training teaches you a lot of things. The way we get our brief, case studies. Most important is a crit session. For those of you who are not familiar, Dato', crit session is a short form for criticism. You work all night and come up with the drawings and everybody criticizes your work. And you can get frustrated as a student, but what you realize is that the teachers are trying to make sure that you believe in your ideas, that you are committed to what you want to do. And it is something that is worth, it's like polishing a diamond. The more they criticize your work, you improve the content of what you do. Next. Next. I'm going to skip a lot of this. Next. Okay. I've talked about the architect being a star developer. There's a myth that developers make a lot of money. And I'm going to show you that's not true. Next. Now, those of you who care to go back to history, in the 1970s, a single-story terrace house in Bangsa was sold for only 20,000. Today, it's worth $1 million. It's gone up 50 times. I remember the land where Damansara Jaya is, it was going for 30,000 an acre. Today, it's all in millions. Shah Alam bungalow lots were sold at 95 cents a square foot. Today, it's 90 ringgit a square foot, 100 times. So who makes the money? It's not the developers. It's the people who buy properties. And in my lectures, I always say, land appreciates, buildings depreciate. So buy the biggest piece of land you can afford, even if you're buying your own house, landed property or a bungalow lot, buy a piece of land, not a property because, not an apartment, because it's a land that appreciates. Next. Next. Now, creativity is not just visualization. It must be needed and you must be able to implement it. Now, once I heard a senior architect say, architects are kind of people who will sit in the office and if there's twin towers, they'll draw 3 towers, the third tower, because they think they want to draw. But it's not needed. Nobody is going to build the third tower. So it is not just imagination. It must be imagination that can happen. Next. 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 Finally, we listed the company in 1999, became one of the biggest property companies in the country. Next. I've been through the experience from an architect to a corporate leader, seen it all. We talked about leadership in the industry. Architects can be leaders at the highest levels. Next. 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 Many people would say you cannot do it, but I've learned from experience, if you are patient enough to understand everybody's problem around the table, you would actually be able to do it and find alternative solutions using the training of an architect. Next. Now, I will end with this last few slides. You need personal development to understand the world around you. Next. Next. You need not just excellence, but discipline. Self-discipline is the most important thing in life. I've learned through the years, if you are not disciplined with yourself, you will achieve nothing. Next. Next. 80-20 principle, you must understand, is a very important part of life. They don't teach you all this in college. You find that everything you do in the world, 20% of the people will have 80% of the wealth. 80% of the people will only have 20% of the wealth. It goes for everything. Who eats the most nasi lemak? 20% of the people eat 80% of the nasi lemak. 80% of the people only eat 20% of the nasi lemak. Everything, the 80-20 rule. That's why you find how many star designer architects do you have? It's less than the 20%. 80% end up tak cukup gaji. Next. You also learn that through personal development, if you're a successful architect, you're under the S quadrant. The more successful you are, the more stressed out you become. You need to be in the business quadrant and investment quadrant to actually see wealth. Next. Next. I'm going to skip all this. Now, among the things we did outside the industry, in CIDB, when I was on the board, we did a round table with all the industry presidents at that time. I had started the Building Industry Presidents Council, and using this platform, we led to the formulation of the construction industry master plan for the country. Next. Many things that's accepted as routine in PAM actually came from our creative ideas that we learned from around the world. When we were in Tokyo, the tours led us to start the PAM site visits of completed buildings. CPD program, we learned from the Philippines. We started our CPD program. I started the first PAM convention that has now become DATAM. And when I went to AIA, I learned about their building exhibition, and that's how we initiated architects in the country. And by selling the PAM land that we had in Tun Razak, and the money that we got out of it is how we built the new PAM building and also bought the chapter buildings. A lot of creativity went into all this. Next. Next. We started the Architecture Asia magazine in '96. 40 years later, it is still going on. China is now producing the magazine. Next. I was the chairman of BIM, bringing together all the professionals. Next. And one of the things we did, we built our building, and that is a building that is providing us rental income for all of our activities today. Next. That's me. You'll find a lot of young people in there. Professor Parit Wadi, Tan Sri Esa, David Tay, Dr. Tan at the back, Datuk Kington Lu. Next. 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 All in all, I've done 40 years of service to the profession in many areas, and many of it I could only do because I was an architect. A lot of creativity went into all these things. Next. Next. I received many awards from around the world. Next. The company also. Next. 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 I'm going to end on this 2-3 slides. With change comes opportunities. Every time there's a change, people are frightened. But every change brings new opportunities. Next. And the changes that are coming in, artificial intelligence, drones, electric vehicles, climate change, health and wellness, all this will provide new opportunities for architects and creativity. Next. Instead of people traveling, now internet enables work to be done. Work moves. We grew up in an age before computers, fax machines, and mobile phones. What it means is talented people can live anywhere and do work globally. Now there's a new word, digital nomads. The world is seeing a fight for talent and brains. Next. Next. That's a famous saying, the illiterate of the future are not those who can't read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Next. 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 Okay, I want to finish off on these 2 slides. I put together this slide to show when were the world's greatest achievements achieved. Most of it was between 50 years and 80 years. That is why, if you look at Kentucky Fried Chicken, the logo is an old man. He found the recipe when he was 55, and nobody wanted to buy it at that time. Now, most of you students are less than 40. You've not even achieved 1% of what you can do. 99% is ahead of you. If you just are disciplined and follow some of the things that I've spoken about today, you can do very, very well in life. Next. Now, the definition of success keeps changing. Next. And for myself, I learned one thing. In Indian philosophy, about 10 years ago, I learned about in life, if you go to a forest and you find a wild horse, your tendency is to catch the horse. You say the horse is mine. Just like the horse is mine, you also get stuck with the horse. And if you catch 20 horses, you get stuck with 20 different things. You only get peace when you start let going one by one. And that's what I've started doing, ladies and gentlemen. For the last 10 years, I've let go a lot of things that I've been doing to find peace in life and seek God's blessings and do meaningful things. And among the meaningful things that I've begun doing is sharing knowledge. And I've started speaking about some of my experiences, and I hope I've done justice this morning to finish off with coming today to talk about 3 things. Next, creativity. Creativity. There are opportunities beyond practice. The last slide, please. And improving yourself through personal development. With that, I'd like to thank UKM and PAM for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berbahagia Datuk, for the speech. We kindly request Yang Berbahagia Datuk to remain on the stage. To express our deepest appreciation, we would now like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Kolonel Bersekutu Pertahanan Awam, Professor Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Syaimi Abdul Rahman, Dean, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment, UKM, accompanied by Yang Berusaha Surveyor Dr. Suhana Johar, Director of International Conference Seni Bina 2025, to present a token of appreciation to Yang Berbahagia Datuk ARP Kasih Anak Lelaki KL Palaniapan, co-founder and prominent shareholder of MK Land Holdings Berhad. We would now like to invite them to the stage. We would now like to invite Yang Berbahagia, Datuk Dr. Ching Thoo A, Secretary General, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability, together with Professor Insinyur Dr. Muhammad Syaimi Abdul Rahman and Professor Insinyur Professor Surveyor Technologist Dr. Adi Irfan Ani, Pro Vice Chancellor of Income Generation and Development UKM, to the stage. Once again, our heartfelt thanks to all the dignitaries for the token presentation just now. You may now be seated. We shall now proceed with the official photo session with our honored guest. Kindly note that the camera is positioned on the stage. We kindly ask everyone to face forward and smile for the camera. Thank you for your cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, with the conclusion of the official photo session, the International Conference on Regional Architecture and Environment 2025 and PAM Postgraduate Conference 2025 is now formally begun. On behalf of the organizers, we would like to express our deepest gratitude and sincere appreciation to all guests in attendance this afternoon. For our VIPs, morning refreshments are served at the nearby lounge. We would like to request the participants of International Conference Seni Bina 2025 to proceed to Dewan Sheikh Osman Sarawak, Faculty of Islamic Studies UKM, for the continuation of the conference sessions. And we would like to request the participants of Matabat 2025 to remain seated in the hall for the next session. Perhatian kepada peserta bagi International Conference Seni Bina 2025, sila bergerak ke Dewan Sheikh Osman Sarawak, Fakulti Pengajian Islam UKM. Manakala bagi peserta Martabat 2025, anda dikehendaki untuk kekal berada di dalam Dewan ini bagi agenda yang seterusnya. Thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.